session for today. I welcome the speakers of the day, Architect Varna Shashidhar and Architect Deepti. We will start the first session for the day. I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Architect Varna Shashidhar. Varna Shashidhar is a landscape architect with a regional landscape practice, PSLA, that focuses on the creation of contextual landscapes. Varna graduated with a Bachelor's of Architecture from RBC and obtained a master's degree in landscape architecture from Harvard University's Graduate School of Design. She has taught as GSD's Career Discovery Program and has worked with leading landscape practices, MBVA Inc. and WRT prior to establishing VSLA in Bengaluru 2013. Her interest lies in the intersection of the built and the natural world and in the ecology and aesthetics of the everyday South Asian landscapes. Her projects have included degraded and ecological sensitive environments. Recent projects include Bangalore International Centre, Neve Academy, Big Brewski, Nama Park, a neighbourhood park in Bengaluru. She has presented her work at the Kala Ghoda Festival, Mumbai, February 2020, and Singapore Institute of Architects Annual Architecture Conference, October 2019. We now welcome Architect Varna to share her presentation with us.
Thank you so much, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Professor Rajashekhar, his colleagues at RIT, and student Chandana for inviting me to be a part of Terrain. Thank you also for your kind introduction, Professor Jyotsna. I'd like to structure my lecture into a little bit of a background to VSLA, the work that we're doing, and looking at the urban landscape through the lens of our projects in practice. So the city is a complex place, and within it lies a hidden ecology. So I'd like to first talk a little bit about my journey into landscape architecture, which started as a student of architecture. I was always interested in architecture, which looked at a generous reciprocity of the built with the landscape. This took me to intern with Sri Lankan architect Anjalendran C. In Colombo. Also, while interning with Anjalendran, led me to an exploration of landscape and an introduction to architecture almost as a symbiotic way of lifestyle melding with landscape, culture, and the environment. My internship was also an incredible time of exposure to philosophy, literature, history, archaeology, apart from architecture. And of course, seeing the works of master designer Geoffrey Bawa were all hugely influential to me. After my architecture studies, I had the fortunate opportunity of studying at the Graduate School of Design and the opportunity to be mentored by some wonderful designers, landscape architects like Margie Ruddick, who are very, very sensitive in their approach to both culture and the environment. Landscape architects Gary Hildebrand, Neil Kirkwood, and others. Also to be mentored by scientists and ecologists. The lessons that I've learned then have been greatly influential in shaping the course of my work now. Also my work in firms in the US and then establishing VSLA in 2013. VSLA is really a very small practice, a small personalized studio. When I started in 2013, I think through this presentation today, I'm going to present both speculative works that the studio has undertaken and how these speculative works have always informed built landscapes. The first image that you see on screen is one of the first things that I worked on during the start of practice. It's the idea of a wetland park in Bangalore, a space that floods seasonally and at other times is a more ephemeral and is an ephemeral landscape, and at other times actually becomes a very usable, functional space that can be used by the community. This is an unbuilt project and also had the opportunity to work on. Can you hear me? Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am, your screen is visible.
Okay, thank you. So, a lot of competition projects were worked on during the initial parts of starting office. Our office still continues to remain involved in working on competitions. And one interesting competition that we were a part of was the Bangalore Club Master Plan competition in 2013. So, where collaborating with SDG and Cadence Architects, we're one of the 4 shortlisted firms. In my presentation, okay. I have to pin my screen. Just a moment, sorry. How do I do that? Do I reshare?
Ma'am, we could see your presentation, ma'am. It was clear and we could hear you also.
Okay. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Can you see my screen now?
Ma'am, you have to share your presentation, ma'am.
Yes, I'm trying to do that. Sorry.
We can see the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about the glitch. So I was talking about Bangalore Club Master Plan competition, which was one of the early projects taken up by the office. So what was interesting is we approached the landscape almost as a connective tissue that integrates the old and the new. Bangalore Club is quite extraordinary. It's actually one of the few remaining green lungs within the city, an urban sanctuary comprising of marvelous existing canopy trees. It is situated close to large green lungs and a significant network of open spaces within the city, basically Lal Bagh, Cubbon Park, Parade Ground. And Bangalore Club's landscape, the way we approached it, was to look at it as a patch in the ecological mosaic with the potential to attract great biodiversity. Also looking at moving beyond the physical boundaries of the site would also preserve a garden city image of Bangalore that was fast vanishing, one associated with large canopy trees and the feeling of being within a large garden. The idea behind the landscape here in our entry was to accentuate the intrinsic qualities of the place, the marvelous canopy trees, and mark history, the gentle topography to create a sanctuary that would provide enormous opportunities for socialization and recreation, a respite from the concrete jungle for its members, apart from providing greater ecosystemic benefits to the city. One of the key design aims was to create a contiguous open space and to also enable walkable, bikeable core within the site. Preservation, adding to the tree cover, enhancing existing biodiversity within the club campus, and also considering sustainable systems on site, including water management, while providing unique recreational opportunities for its members was the main focus of this exercise. So these were some of the ideas that we were really looking at. We were also looking at how site history can be approached in a way that will evolve and transform, where the built and the landscape strategies are cyclical, where the new will replace the old in phases. We really did not win the competition, but it led to many more opportunities for our office. Moving on, the next project that we worked on, which is once again a project which was a competition project, was actually looking at how to intervene within the city more at a landscape infrastructure level. This was the Hyderabad Metro Rail competition. And entering the Hyderabad Metro Rail competition in 2014, the exercise was really to look at a 1.5 kilometer median stretch at Metagoda Tarnaka Junction. However, the way we approached this design exercise was not as a limited median stretch of 1.5 kilometers. We saw this as great potential to intervene within the 72 kilometer metro median corridor, which we thought presented an extraordinary opportunity. So the design proposed an ecological strand for the city of Hyderabad running through the metro median corridor, reminiscent of the city's rich ecological, geological and cultural history. So our work really looked at mapping the history of the city, both culturally, architecturally, as well as through the lens of geology and ecology. We looked at the geomorphology of the site, as well as understanding the ecology of the city and the hidden ecology behind the city. So the idea was to create a signature green corridor using this information. We did extensive studies into the open space network, into the transportation networks within the city, looking at various destinations where this eco-strand will actually intervene. And the various neighborhoods within which the metro rail corridor transects. So coming back, the idea was to really create a signature green corridor for the city of Hyderabad that is really reminiscent of Hyderabad's rich geological and ecological history. This trail, we thought, would follow the physical trail of the metro rail, forming a linear infrastructural landscape that will reveal the hidden ecology behind the metro corridor, a riparian corridor for urban birds, small mammals, butterflies, an ecological and didactic experience which will engage the users and the viewers, both the pedestrians and motorists, in a memorable journey. So this is how we actually glimpsed the whole notion of the eco-strand. There were areas with noisy, heavy traffic, which meant actually only being able to glimpse into these landscapes. Also other areas where there was slower traffic, which would create points of pause where you would actually experience the landscape. So we were also looking at the idea of landscapes that would be undisturbed by humans, also kinetic landscapes, landscapes that would also, on the other hand, looking at landscapes that would actually become temporary exhibits, reading, talking, movement, pause points So this whole confluence of both of these, keeping in mind the various traffic flows. We've moved on to look at the various corridors, stretches within this whole eco-strand where, the ideas of boulders, recycled slabs, ledges, and beds would actually intervene. There were other areas which would actually become seasonal gardens, areas where the scrub jungle, scrub landscape, urban scrub landscape would sort of intervene. We were also focusing on how to collect water through this whole system of rain gardens beneath the metro rail corridor. And this was how we were looking at these various stretches. How kinetic screens would intervene, how there would be spaces for biodiversity within this narrow stretch. Ideas of water, collecting water. Also looking at the various characters of the landscape, in this case, a rock garden as one of the linear stretches. Also, transformation in the nights about what this corridor would actually become in the form of signages, in terms of installations and so on. So more at a micro scale, so we thought that this would align with the sustainability goals proposed by the Hyderabad Metro Rail Corporation and augment the green identity proposed for the city of Hyderabad. At a micro scale, we were examining the Metugoda Tarnaka 1.5 kilometer median stretch, which was actually the proposed site for the median design, through a series of gardens. So these gardens would act as rain gardens, like I mentioned, rock gardens, flower gardens, urban scrub jungles, and therefore will become an ecological and artistic amenity for the neighborhood and a very interesting segment within the larger eco-strand. Coming back to our own practice. So VSLA is a very small personalized practice, like I mentioned. We are usually 3 or 4 in a team. It's me with usually 2 designers. Sometimes we have an intern or 2 join us. So VSLA believes in embracing a systemic ecological approach to the creation of landscapes. So we've worked on a diverse set of projects within the 6 years our office has been in existence. Our firm remains very small and very closely knit. And now moving on to actually looking at what VSLA really does. The opportunity to work on one of the first few projects, which was the Bangalore Club Master Plan Design Competition, led to a very interesting commission that our office had an opportunity to work on, which was the Neve Academy Primary School. The map of Bangalore that you'll see highlights some of the projects that I'll talk about today in my presentation. Our first built project with VSLA was Neve Academy Primary School, which was an outcome of Bangalore Club Master Plan competition. The school here is designed by 100 Hands, and I will very briefly show you a few images of the school and really not go into details. But the idea was to really create a meaningful, didactic, and playful experience for children through the landscape in this very tight urban half-an-acre site located in Yamalur. We also later had an opportunity to work with Venkatraman Associates with the high school building within the same campus. So with 100 Hands, we were really looking at how to intervene at almost a micro environment level to create interesting, didactic, playful spaces for the children in the primary school. So within the city, this was the sort of condition that we were presented with. And these were some of the didactic ideas that we proposed after a close study of the syllabus of Neve. So these small, tight, set back or, spaces really became a didactic amenity for the children to intervene. The whole school really looks at permaculture at a large level now. So open spaces are closely integrated with their syllabus and actually become very didactic. We're looking at the idea of creating varied environments for the primary children to actually intervene in, whether it is the study of physics and dynamics of water in one of the courtyards that we've created, or the notion of a performative landscape. So I'll move on to a public park that we've been involved in for a few years now. Nama Park, located right opposite our office in Jayanagar 5th block. So Nama Park was a project. It actually started off as a competition project, playscape competition project that we took part in a few years ago after we observed a derelict park located, a very tiny pocket park, almost 100 by 120 feet. That was lying derelict within our neighborhood, right opposite our office. So this open space was being used as a garbage dump. There was extensive burning and a lot of dilapidated play equipment, which were outright dangerous, rusting. So this was the condition of the park or the open space. And the children of the neighborhood got together to form a small group called Eco Warriors and highlighted the sort of degradation that this open space was sort of being subjected to. This is really the condition of how the park was. And helping the community and the children to sort of actually come together to share their ideas, to raise awareness within the community. We approached this park, we wanted to approach this park almost as an urban living room for the people in the community. Because despite its dilapidated condition, we observed a lot of women within the neighborhood use this park, brought their children to this park, spent time, because the houses in this area are about 15 to 20 feet, with a lot of families living within one building. So they really did not have opportunities to have space to actually interact with one another, and they continue to use this dilapidated space to congregate. So these were the children who became a part of the team that we worked with while redesigning this park, and who initiated this process. And we were really then beginning to look at how do we approach this park? And the way we really approached this was really looking at the center space within the park being given to children, whereas the exterior, creating a loop around the exterior, which would actually function as a space for the community to intervene in, to actually, there is a small plan to the right that you will observe. We were really looking at the core being given to the children, whereas the periphery would be actually actively used by the people of the community, the women, other people who would actually come and rest there, vendors, and so on and so forth. So these were some of the ideas of what we proposed within this very small pocket park. And the planting strategy, where we really tried to keep all of the existing trees and to really do little in terms of intervening additionally. We were looking at the exterior periphery to actually become a rain garden loop. And really, this is what we had proposed, the center being given to children. But while we coordinated with BBMP, the typical BBMP park fencing was brought in, where we had actually planned a sculptural fencing which could become a part of the playscape. BBMP fencing was brought in and actually just laid there, and then we really had to work with the fencing condition. And so we still continue to develop a strategy for the park, which actually we were looking at the center again being given to children in a loop, which actually became a walking loop, and spaces for people within the community to actually sit, rest, and spend time. There was also a sensorial pathway in the center of the garden, which could be used as a play path by children. And keeping all of the existing tree, the planting intervention was minimal while retaining the tree. It was only shrubs and other vegetation that was added. We kept it simple, budget was low. The corporator supported us in this endeavor. So these were some of the ideas that sort of developed. And then looking at the typical BBMP fencing, but looking at how we could paint it in a way that it would create an optical illusion and would actually add to the play component. So this is the previous condition of the park. And this is what it's been converted into. It's almost an escape within the heart of the city. For the neighborhood, it's just at a neighborhood level. One of the trees which had been badly abused, like a lot of burning, fell over, and this is the kind of space that was created. So, this is during the process of working on this park. And this is what the park has now become. It's a little sanctuary for the people within the community. This is how things were. This is the local corporator, Mrs. Nagaratna, who was quite supportive of this process. And this is what the park is now. All around, it's surrounded by very small residences, very dense. This is some of the planting within the park. I'd like to move to my next project, which is Big Brewski, a microbrewery located in Bengaluru, in Hennur.
Madam, can I explain, please?
Yes. Sorry?
As far as your design is concerned, you are mainly concentrating on the basic design, and also kindly give us what are the plants, trees, which are incorporated along with the design, so that the entire landscape is without any plant species which you are mentioning. What are the plant species, what are the tree species which you incorporate within the available design, what you have done. Can you please elaborate in that fashion in the next topic, please?
Can we come back to it in terms of questions at a later point, sir?
all participants. So we'll all just take the questions in the end, sir. So we can take all the questions and we can ask ma'am in the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you, sir. We'll come back to your question towards the end. In Big Brewski is one of India's largest microbreweries. It's located in Hennur. And the architecture was designed by Matthew Ghosh. The project was actually very challenging in terms of landscape because considering it's one of the largest microbreweries, there is extensive brewing equipment. So most of the building is on slabs. So as you can see, this is the condition of how Big Brewski was. It was almost designed to be at a theatrical scale for huge events, with heavy footfalls of people expected, around 2,000 per event, such as sports matches and so on. The project was extremely challenging for landscape because the equipment and services involved was so large and extensive. So basically, this is the built scenario. A lot of brewing equipment went under slab. So as you can see, most of the space is on slab with very little room for contact with earth at all. There were a few existing trees on site which have all been retained. There were about 4 or 5 trees on site, including some of the eucalyptuses that have existed from a long time. All of these have been retained. And basically, the architecture created by MGA was almost looking at it as an idea of a ruin within the heart of the city. And what I did want to do with the landscape was to actually augment this idea of a ruin, where landscape adds the additional dimension, a more temporal dimension, as it takes on over the structure, adding this component of time, growth, and change. So as you can see, what was available were very the idea was to create these slivers, which would then also create a feeling of being within an oasis. It was extremely hard, really no connection with earth at all in most spaces. And to add to the complexity of it, in the center of this whole design comprised of rapidly flowing water. So basically, this is the structure that you see. This is what was available. And really looking at how to intervene when there is very limited room for planting. So, looking at the idea of varied kinds of landscapes where, if edges, intervening within the water, intervening as surfaces. So really looking at it almost in a way where, looking at it almost in a micro environment way to actually intervene. So this is the plan of the whole site. And as you can see, the trees that you see in the center were existing. The central area is actually the area of the open water body, which is also a fast-moving, rapid water. And really looking at how landscape can intervene given this very tight scenario. So we were looking at creating a series of different micro environments and looking at the way native planting can actually intervene, looking at a maintenance regime that could be created. Brewski had a wonderful team who actually became stewards of the environment. A lot of planting within Brewski is edible, used in making their beverages, so on. So in terms of a diagram of how we planted, these were various zones that we created, buffer zones, looking at aquatic plants, and within aquatic plants, looking at a variety of plants, looking at edge condition planting, looking at vegetated walls, looking at areas, since we really couldn't intervene with earth alone. So how do you maximize this experience of being within this ruin taken over by vegetation. So as you move on, you'll see the ideas of how planting can actually intervene and become a part of crevices even within the water to add to this experience. Also, it was actually very challenging because we had only 6 months to execute this because Brusky had to open by June and we started planting sometime in February. This is now, of course, how Brusky looks. So, looking at technical challenges, basically turnover time, limited ground access, planting that needed to actually withstand footfalls and crowds and urban stress. And so the experience now from slabs and a very concrete environment into almost an escape within the city. The species composition, this is before species composition have been determined based on available sunlight. I mean, we've looked at the notion of creating these micro ecosystems within the landscape. And so now this is what the landscape expression really looks like. So with the high walls, there is this idea of feeling, almost a feeling of being within an oasis, but also a feeling of sort of the landscape taking over, a sense of lost time, being lost in time, and also a selection of plants that create this effect of almost a ruinscape, all within the heart of Bangalore's traffic, high rises, and chaos. The whole day and night experience is very different in Brusky. If that was the day experience, this is how the night experience is. So from Brusky, I'd like to move to the last project that I'm going to show today, which is also one of my most recent projects. It is a remediation landscape located within heart of Bangalore. It is Bangalore International Center. The architecture, we had a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with architects 100 Hands on this project. 100 Hands won this project as a competition a few years ago. So Bangalore International Center is a wonderful democratic public institution for cross-cultural ideas and dialogues. It hosts numerous programs that are free and totally open for the public to engage in. As I mentioned, 100 Hands were the architects who we collaborated with on this project, and they had won this project in a competition. This space opened to public last February and has hosted numerous events till our recent lockdown, very actively used by the people in the community. It's located within this really dense neighborhood of Domlur, which has amongst the highest noise levels within the city. So the location of the site was actually beside a derelict land, which you can see highlighted in 2, designated as a public park, also beside army lands, and adjoining the city's stormwater nala, that's along here. So the site was 1 acre, and due to the high programmatic built requirements, it actually includes a 185-seat auditorium. It includes seminar rooms, art galleries, cafes, offices, and associated services. The amount of open space that was available was very limited. The setback to the rear of the building adjoins the city's stormwater drain, or the Nala, and the area comprised of highly degraded and polluted soils with constant seepage from the Nala. The channel is extremely polluted with a discharge of raw waste. Additionally, during summers, this waste water stagnates, creating unsightly flotsam with foul odor and mosquitoes near the institution. So this was actually the condition of the site and the space we had to actually intervene with. So the key intention here was to really look at improving the quality of this space as an ecological corridor and as an amenity for the visitors and residents of the neighborhood in mitigating any further pollution of the Nala. It's been conceived of more as a performative landscape that aims at creating an urban ecosystem that now attracts varied species of urban mammals, birds, and we've also really looked at connecting this and linking this green way along the Nala almost as a corridor with the larger open spaces such as the neighborhood park over here, the army lands, and really looking at it as a riparian buffer along the Nala. So the design really aimed to look beyond the site constraints and the aesthetics to really function as a public amenity and really look at contributing to environmental remediation. So the landscape was also looked at as a space that would encourage visitors of BIC to engage in the outdoors. So the key components of the landscape was a linear garden that you see here towards the front. We also looked at a linear permeable greenway towards the Nala edge, looking at a biological pond and buffers along the edges. So these were the various layers, the kind of planting, the kind of intervention in terms of hardscape and planting that we've really looked at. And the front, which was actually a linear garden, had very limited open space available for planting. The planting in the front has been planned as 2 stretches, which is about 1.5 meters wide, to provide a green band towards the edge, closer to the building, that would actually provide a more whimsical idea of nature, and one towards the edge of the road, which would actually then connect with the peripheral street trees. The garden, this space in the front is more for waiting and relaxing, while the space at the back really acts as a filtration garden all along the Nala, more a riparian buffer. So this diagram shows you the amount of planting and the available space we had to actually intervene. The way we really began to look at paved areas becoming an extension and connecting to the architecture, and the entire space along the riparian corridor to look at dry laid chapadi, local chapadi, along with crushed gravel. The enormous services that sort of intersected and weaved through which we had to really keep in mind while designing. And really looking at the idea of this very textural pathways. The driveway, where we had to really look at creating a space which would function with disabled visitors, senior visitors, also people in heels. And so a very careful study of how to actually pave, and then using a remnant material from internal floor paving, almost, creating a notion of whimsy and sort of intervening with the planting. So careful studies of what these paving and paving pattern would actually be. An idea of recycling materials using waste quota from the interior and integrating it into the landscape. So, and this photo will show you the amount of space we had towards the entry, which actually formed the linear garden. Very limited stretch of open space, considering we had to also keep a driveway. So this whole process of creating the landscape. This is the available space, and you can see here very, very tight space available for any kind of planting. This is how the site was before, with degraded soils. And this is the condition that's been created for people to actually gather, wait. The furniture includes long monolithic benches. There's also colorful movable furniture for seating and waiting. And how the landscape sort of augmented and sort of created this shaded space for people to actually wait between performances, have lunch, to gather. Almost a touch of whimsy to an otherwise very stately building. Also creation of these pollinator gardens towards the front, which attracts a lot of biodiversity. The building also We also looked at the idea of creating a biological pond that the lobby opens into, creating an ecosystem there, and also a very reposeful space. Very narrow water depth was available, but we really looked at how this edge that sort of faced the derelict parkland could actually create a feeling of expanded sense of greenery for the occupants of the lobby. It also cools the breeze that comes into the lobby from the south and sort of demarcates the parking ramp that you really don't see. So this is how the space was originally meant to be a step out. This is what we have really converted it into. Almost a backdrop for the occupants, backdrop to the exhibitions that occur within the lobby at times, but also very reposeful space. We're looking at the planting to allow the visitors in the lobby to feel an expanded sense of greenery and a sense of contiguity with the visual borrowing of the landscape with the neighboring park beyond, which we hope one day will come to life. This pond also conceals vehicular movement that really occurs beyond and is actually the parking ramp. Also, the cafe opens out into the Nala, which was once a very comprised totally of degraded soils, into this very lush, performative landscape. So the landscape looked at creating a functioning urban ecosystem from this really degraded space that now attracts a variety of urban mammals and birds, almost a multi-sensorial urban wilderness, an escape from urbanity while being at the heart of the city. Like I told you, it's very contrasting, very high levels of noise, pollution, but at the same time, serenity. So this whole entire back linear permeable greenway is a rain garden. So it forms a backdrop to the cafe. So this is how the space was. So this, converting it into a filtration garden with fragrant plants that biologically filter storm water, plants that actually, there is basically exposure to dense vegetation in this area, gravel, soils, which allow for slow infiltration and then collection in a perforated subdrain. So thereby we reduce the pollution of the adjoining Nala. The plants that have been used within also facilitate the removal of pollutants within the storm water. And also the overall planting density over here is extremely high. That increases infiltration. And as you can see, the whole walkway is a very sensorial, tactile walkway made comprising of very low-cost, local chapati, crushed jelly. We have inserts of found objects within the space that actually become water holders for birds and butterflies, and so on. So, a lot of plants. I think somebody was asking me what kinds of plants: Cymbopogon, Nerium, Cyprus alternifolia. So many species of plants have been used here to really looking at creating this corridor, which is both performative, but also adds textural and sort of fragrant aspects apart from seasonal color. So this is how the Nala and the space really looked like. And, while we were planting and as we were planting, this is the manifestation of this particular corridor now. I think this drawing gives you an idea of how we really wanted to intervene in a very sensitive way. And what we chose to create within that really degraded corridor. So this space really adds a touch of whimsy. People take breaks from performances. It comprises of native as well as adapted species of plants over here. Cost here has been cut using local stone, salvaging stone. This whole project has been submitted for Griha rating, 5-star rating. So the idea over here largely was to create an expansive garden experience even within this limited space. Idea of remediation, stormwater management, looking at really preventing urban heat island, acting as a noise buffer, creating biodiversity, and most of all, creating an escape within the city. I'm going to end with 2 short videos of what this space feels like. This first video is about pollinators at BIC. And the last one is how we crafted this landscape. I think there is a time lag with the video. I'll be sharing a link to the video so that the audience can actually see it in their own time.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, your voice is breaking, sir. Could you please type in your question?
Madam, as far as you have given a very elaborate account on the hard landscape, on what are the various salient features which you have covered. Did you have not given the plants, what are the plants which are used for covering the nalas? What are the tree species? What are the shrub species? What are the flowering species? What is the lawn? That should also be part and parcel of the legend in your landscape class. And I think you have definitely collaborated with some horticulturists in and around Bangalore, which have some of the nurseries. And every plant has its own merit and demerit as far as the to cover the landscape, which was previously in a very bad shape, and now and what is in present shape, and what is the type of foliage, whether it is a creeping foliage or a linear foliage, all the and what is the flower species, and which part of the month you can see flowers, which part of which you don't see flowers, which part you are covered with lawn, what type of lawn, whether it is a weed lawn or a carpet lawn or all these things should have given more elaborate in the, I think in the coming refinement of your lectures in the coming days, kindly incorporate those so that it will be more interesting. Because as an horticulturist, as a floriculturist, we basically look what type of plants which you are used for your covering of the nala, which you get bad smell from the nala, and what are the plants which you can prevent, and what are the trees which prevent this smell from when you are dining in the area where you are located in some of the places where you are given. All these things play a very important role. And so choosing of the plant, timing of the plant, flowering of the plant, and foliage expansion of the plant, all these things, and combined with that, the lighting part, how much of light it gives, either it gives a checkered light or a partial light.
Sir, your voice is breaking, sir. We request you to please type your question. I request all the participants to please type in their questions in the chat box. We will be asking the speaker the questions on your behalf. Thank you so much. Varna ma'am, would you like to address the question asked by sir?
Yeah. So I think Mr. Srinivas's question was why hasn't the planting species been mentioned for each of the project? I think BIC alone had about 78 species of plants that we've used. I think rightfully so, a lot of species have really looked at remediating soils. Some species have really various grass species have looked at really looking at water and removing pollutants from water. Certain species have fragrances. For more information, I'm happy to provide links to publication of this project, which should give you more of an idea and more details about specific projects. So please do contact me, and I will be in touch sharing links to it. I think also with Brewski has a huge, I think close to 60 species of plants have been used in Brewski. I don't think this presentation was geared towards the idea of revealing hidden ecologies on site and urban landscape. So I really did not get into details of plant species or specific design elements. But for more information, I'm happy to correspond with you and share links. So, thank you.
One more small this one, madam.
Sure.
The project which you have done.
Yes.
You have incorporated more of fountains, more of water fountains, because a lot of them are just a flowing sun. Instead of
Srinivas sir, we kindly request you to please type in your questions because your voice is not very clear here. Ma'am, there are a few questions from the participants.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of questions. Should I take them in the order that I've received them?
Ma'am, I'll actually call out the questions for you and
Yeah,
you can
please,
answer.
please. Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem, ma'am. The first question is from Mr. Shivlinge Gowda. He says, what are the limitations or challenges during your site survey with respect to natural light and choosing right planting materials? Can you give us some insight on the same for the Hyderabad metro work?
Okay, Hyderabad Metro Rail was a speculative project. It was an entry into a competition which we really did not win, because the idea was we really did not only look at the 1.5 kilometer stretch, we actually looked at this whole thing being a vision for Hyderabad. So in terms of natural light and choosing the plants at site, we really did not get into it. But the idea was to look at really the local ecology, to integrate the natural landscape that existed within Hyderabad, the idea of a geomorphological landscape into and celebrating it through this entire eco-strand. Professor Jyotsna, does it answer the question? Hello?
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes. Thank you so much for your answer, ma'am.
No problem.
Ma'am, there's another question from Ms. Shilpa.
Okay.
She says, what is your take on the land use change that is happening? That is the green converted to grey.
Where exactly?
Ma'am, I think she's talking about Bangalore in general.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a very, very sad scenario. And I think looking at the city also being a crucible for urban landscape and, a great component to the urban ecosystem is very important. So as much as we can do to, preserve green cover and add to the urban environment in a positive manner is always welcome.
Okay. Ma'am, there's another question from Mr. Baswarajappa.
Okay.
He says, can you suggest some best softwares for landscape design?
I don't think we are a very hands-on practice, and it's the very typical, design software that we use, as would any designer, in terms of communicating, our design ideas. So I am really not aware. I think I'm not aware of the best software.
Okay. Ma'am, there's another question. There's a question from Neha.
Mm-hmm.
She says, in your project BCI, you had mentioned about polluted soils. Could you elaborate how you dealt with them?
Yeah. So basically, there had been a lot of, there was a lot of degraded soils on site in Bangalore International Center. Added to it, I think we've used planting largely. We've really had to study what kind of planting would work within that soil, and also the Nala seepage. There was a lot of seepage. As you saw photographs of the Nala, there was a lot of seepage from the Nala into the site. So the plant species that were used were really ones that sort of removed the pollutants within the soil and also within water. We've used plants like Nerium, we've used Cymbopogon, so on. And also, it had to be a very careful selection to really work with that degraded soil condition.
Ma'am, they're asking you about the project maintenance of your Big Brewski project. Could you please give us some insight about it?
Yeah, actually, the Brewski team is amazing. Most of these public projects, I think it was very important to keep in mind that the planting had to be resilient in order, most of the planting is native or, local. some of them are adapted, so requiring minimal maintenance. But the Brewski team is absolutely on board. They are really stewards of the landscape. The whole team is very much attuned to the landscape. Despite completing this project in 2018, they continue to remain in touch very frequently. A maintenance plan and ideas of maintaining it has also been discussed with them.
Ma'am, thank you so much. There are a lot more questions, but I think we will mail you these questions and you can answer them, and we will send the same to the participants.
And that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to answer everybody's questions, and kindly do send us your feedback, and you can stay in touch with us through the contact information shared on the screen. Thank you so much for this opportunity, RIT.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing with us your projects with so much of passion. The ecological approach towards your projects was very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
I would now request our HOD, Professor Pushpa Devanathan, to say a few words. Over to you, ma'am. Pushpa, ma'am. Pushpa, can you hear me? Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. It's extremely nice to be talking about a landscape project and a very, very young architect at that. Thank you so much, Varna Shashidhar. It's been a pleasure. This digital medium has not given us a chance to lay back and say that we have not met the person, we don't know them, or we don't know their projects. It's given us enough scope to actually be along with the landscape people, be along with the hands-on, down to the earth, those who really worked, and then feel for the same. Varna, it's been a beautiful experience, and I've been told that you are a young architect who's had a lot of exposure. And I've been through the presentation, your range of projects from the residences to the public landscape, and that a young one is able to handle all the intricacies is something very, very impressive for all of us. And handling of the restricted places, the snuggling in of the landscape in between the built form really gives me something to chew about. As a green warrior, I'm sure you will be bringing in much more delightful places in the many more years to come. Thanks for sharing your presentation with us, and to have interactions at this medium and through other medium also. Thank you, Varna, for coming in for this FTP.
Thank you so much, Professor. Really appreciate it.
Madam, a small session. Hello?
Yes, who are you addressing?
I told you I'm Dr. Srinivas, Professor of Horticulture. Since you graduate every year, a lot of students keep passing out in the architecture course. I think you should have a integration of floriculture MSc and PhD students who are doing their MSc floriculture and landscaping, so that integration of engineering, horticulturists, floriculturists will give a better, better approach in building up of the project, so that what they see live and what they experience live in the execution of various phases of project.
We will try to integrate it. We will see what we can do about it. Thank you for the thank you for all the participants who have participated in this FTP and also enjoyed Varna Shashidhar's landscape and felt about it. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. We will now move on to the second session. We have with us architect Deepti CB. A small introduction about Deepti. Architect Deepti is a passionate landscape architect who completed her bachelor's, securing a gold medal from National Institute of Technology, Calicut in 2011, and her master's from CEPT University in 2013. Architect Deepti has gained her professional experience from some of the noted and inspiring architects and landscape architects. This includes architect Chandramohan and Associates, Trivandrum, Kerala, Zakaria Consultants, Bangalore for her architectural training. As a landscape architect, she worked briefly at Brief Garden Sri Lanka, the garden of Davis Baba and Jeffrey Baba, after which she worked with Oikos Bengaluru for 3 years. Deepti also has been teaching in Ramaya School of Architecture, and she has a teaching experience from CEPT University, Ahmedabad. Architect Deepti is currently the principal landscape architect for Dharitri in Bangalore. She has recently won and executed a International Garden Festival 2020 for the famous Castle and UNESCO Heritage Site of Soulaur, France. With this brief introduction, I welcome today's speaker, Architect Deepti. Deepti, hear me?
Hi, Jyotsna, can you hear me?
Yeah, Deepti, we can hear you. Can you please share your press?
Yes. You need to grant me admission or something? It's not coming.
Just to check. We'll just check on it, please.
Yeah.
I request all the participants to please type in their questions in the chat box. We will be asking the speaker in the end of the session. Thank you so much. Deepti, can you hear me? Deepti, please unmute yourself.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, Deepti.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks a lot, Jyotsna, for the wonderful introduction. And myself, Deepti, and I have been practicing for the past 3 years. And this year, 2 of my very interesting gardens got executed. So, how Jyotsna said, the first one was in France, and the second one is in Bangalore. So, I'll be mostly presenting these 2 gardens today. So there is this very famous international garden competition which happens every year in France, and where 20 gardens are selected from all over the world. And this time my garden got selected, and this was the first time in 28 years an Indian entry had got selected. So it was a matter of great pride to participate in this competition. So for the same, I had to visit twice to Paris. One was in January, and the second one was in March. And because of this, I could explore the city to a great extent, and it was a great learning experience for me too. So, like how we all know, this is area for art, architecture, science, finance, food. It's also called the City of Light, City of Love. So there are a lot of names to the city. So it was a great experience to roam around the city and explore the places. So the Paris city has a very interesting town planning or a city planning guideline. So that if you look at history, all these French rulers, they made a point to mark their building like before leaving. Like, so there are a lot of museums, palaces, and gardens all around the city. So if you look at this layout, there is a river, it's called Seine River, and to the right side of the river is the historical city, and to the left side is the modern city. So it's almost like with tall skyscrapers and completely contrasting to the historical city, what we see. So again, one more interesting aspect is this line which runs along the city. It's an axis with very important landmarks which connects the right to the left. So on the right, we have the famous Louvre Pyramid. And then after that, an arch comes, that's the Grand Arch, Architrave. And on the extreme left, the modern version of it, which it's called La Défense Arch. So it's the same Arc de Triomphe, which has been given a more minimal outlook. And this whole axis is highlighted with trees, parks. So I found that very interesting in regards to the city planning for the place. So if you look at this photograph, that contrast is very clearly seen. This is the old historical city, and to the other side is the modern city. So there are very interesting guidelines to the city planning for the historical part in regards to the height of the building and the use of material. So there's a stone called as Paris stone. It's a kind of limestone, which is quite famous, and it's widely used in this part of the city or the historical part. So it's more of an urban planning, great learning in that regards. And because of the two visits, I was able to see some architecture wonders by world famous architects. So if you see the first building, it's designed by Franco Gehry and Louis Vuitton Foundation. It's designed like a sail with an iceberg. And it's very interesting. It's located to a road which is called Avenue Mahatma Gandhi. So we have an MG road even in Paris, which was quite interesting. Yeah, and the next building after that comes Centre Pompidou, designed by Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers. Then IMPI and the most famous Villa Savoy. So it was a great experience to see those modern buildings. So because Paris was one of the centers where the modern form of architecture had started. So yes. And the next one, of course, the old ones like the Pantheon or the Musée d'Orsay. If you see the second picture, it's a very interesting railway station which has been converted into a museum, and it has very famous paintings by famous artists. Then, of course, the Eiffel Tower and a very interesting chapel or church with almost 15-meter tall glass stained windows. So yes. And then, of course, seeing famous paintings of the most popular painting, Mona Lisa or Piet Mondrian, Van Gogh, Frida Kahlo. So, yes. And like how I mentioned, I've gone in January and also in March. So I could see a sudden shift in the planting palette. So it's a place where it's very cold. During January time, it was almost freezing cold, like 4 to 7 degrees Celsius. And this is a time when all the trees are deciduous, they are bare, and it's almost like a monochrome landscape color palette. And the same place, when I went in March, it was the springtime, the spring festival, where the whole streets are filled with cherry blossom trees, or there are lilies, or tulips, or rhododendrons. So there was so much of color in the whole city. So being from a tropical state and being from South India, this was something very new for me, that sudden shift or the seasonal shift in landscape. So, yeah. So, like how I mentioned, the city of Paris, and you basically need to board a train, almost 1.5 hour journey from Paris, to come to further south to a town called as Blois. And this was an old royal city in former days, and it has one of the maximum collection of castles and museums, churches. So the castle where I was participating in, this was located in the same town of Blois, and it's called Chaumont-sur-Loire. So yeah, it's a very quaint, very pretty, very calm place or a town, hardly 40,000 population. And if you look at the building size, they are very small with little cottages and the chimney coming out. And it's located in a valley called as the Loire Valley. And it was very different to the busy Paris city. And there is very interesting is that there's a landscape college in this town also. So yeah, so the castle called as Chaumont-sur-Loire is located in this town, and it was great participating in this competition. I had to go twice, and this every year they give a theme to which you need to design the garden, and we'll see. Yeah, so this is the castle property. It's almost 32 hectares in area, and if you it's almost 32 hectares in area, and the castle is the one which you see near the top. It's a beautiful Renaissance styled castle and next to the Loire River. And these structures, what you see, they are the cottages or the bungalows within the property. And there are cafeterias, there are restaurants, there are stay facilities, and art exhibitions all happen in this pocket. And the entry, you'll see a very interesting herb garden located in the entrance. And this pocket, what you see is the place where the 20 gardens get installed. So this is the plan of the area. So this is the castle area, and these are the pockets where the 20 gardens come. And so every year a theme is given to the participants, and this year there are no
Deepti, sorry to interrupt you, but I think your voice is breaking. There must be some network issues. Deepti, can you hear me?
Mother is
Deepti, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. I think there was some network issues. We couldn't hear you just a minute back.
Oh, okay. Oops. Now it's fine, right?
Yeah, now it's fine.
Okay. So yeah, the brief, what it said was, as per Greek philosophy, there is a goddess called as Gaia. She is meant to personify fertile earth, or believed to be the giver of life, and she's a deity as comparable to the Hindu goddess Parvati. And what the brief said was that you need to come up with designs which glorify the wonders of Mother Nature, and it can be culturally rooted to your country, but at the same time it can have a modern touch to it. So this is the plot which is given. It's almost it's a very odd shaped site, and it's 2,000 square feet in area. And we were supposed to design in this plot and sent our entries last year, almost towards November time. So how I started developing the design was that if we look at our ancient stories and beliefs, we always used to consider Mother Nature or Earth to be very sacred, and we always used to worship her as the giver of life, and she was glorified in our folk songs, in our poetry, in dance, and most importantly in our harvest festivals. So if we look at most of our festivals all across India, be it Onam, Lodi, Makar Sankranti, Bihu, they were all inspired. They give gratitude to Mother God, Mother Earth, thanking her for the great crop that was received that year. So this was one of the ideas which I wanted to incorporate in my design. And the second one was the idea of homestead gardens. So if you look at our olden houses, there was always a little piece of land with vegetables growing, timber or timber trees or flowers for worship, and there'll be fodder for the cattle, and it was almost a very self-sufficient little house. So that was one of the type of gardens what we used to see in our ancient times. So I wanted to have a garden which has a functional planting palette too. So these are the schematic sketches for the garden. So when you enter, there will be this tall series of plants, and which kind of arouse a sense of curiosity. You're like, what is lying beyond? You don't see the design. And along with that, there are a lot of fragrant plants which are planted along this whole stretch to give a very welcoming feel. And these flowers can be used for worship. And at the same time, they are inspired from the French perfume industry. So roses, jasmine, lavender, all this grow very well in France. So these plants were selected. And slowly the view starts opening up, and you see a circular pond, a very clean circular pond, which has a reflective quality. And in this pond, there is the sky which gets reflected on the water. So there is a very interesting belief in our ancient scriptures that Father Sky and Mother Earth, they complement each other. So I wanted to get that concept in the design. And slowly you start seeing this water body and a series of 3-stepped terrace.
Hi, we have lost audio again.
Sorry, I think she has some network issues. Just give us a minute.
Hello, can you see me here?
Yeah, Dipti, we can see you. I think there was another network problem. Dipti, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Dipti, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I'm really sorry. The internet is fluctuating today. So, am I visible?
Yes, Dipti, you're visible.
Okay.
She's still not there. Deepti, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Is the slide seen?
Yeah, the slide is seen. You just need to make it full screen.
Okay.
Deepti, is there a problem?
Yeah, it's getting stuck. Yeah, now can you see?
Yeah, we can see the presentation.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So yes, so the view opens up into this circular water body, and you start seeing the stepped terraces, which further reflects into the water body. And finally, you take this circle and you can climb the steps and move from a higher elevation, look down. And these steps are inspired from, again, our paddy fields. And this way you complete this whole loop and exit from the garden. So we are in the end completing the circumambulatory path, or also called as the Pradakshina path, when there is generally done when there is something sacred. So this is a section of the garden across the bend and the water body and stepped terraces. And this was the plan. So a very elaborate list of planting was done with the fragrant plants coming in the center, in the entry, and slowly the planting palette changes to more plants which are fruit bearing or have medicinal values, or a lot of herbs were added because French cuisine, French food is mint, all these plants are added in this pocket. And then this series of step terraces with, of course, rice will not grow in that area. So the grasses which mimic rice and its various stages of growth were used in these three tiers. So these are the final rendered images. So it's the foliage with the fragrant plants, and the visitor is curious as to enter like what is happening beyond. And slowly the garden starts opening with a little circular pond reflecting the sky, and you get glimpses of the stepped paddy terraces. And finally you come to this corner bench from where you can sit and contemplate and see the garden and see the stepped terraces and just enjoy the view. And finally you climb up and take this path and exit through the garden. So this was the design, and I had to make 2 visits, one in January, and that was more to see the plot, meet the contractors, decide upon the planting palette, the costing, and it was this town, and I was given a translator. He was from Germany, and he was communicating my voice and their voice, and it was very interesting, and it was a very different experience for me. And March time when I went, my friend also accompanied. And this is the bungalow or the cottages which I was saying in the beginning. There is the office block, there's a dining quarter, and this is the water body in the center with again cottages around it. And this was a place where we were provided accommodation, a very cute. But now things have changed. It's all electric thermal castle, and the premises of it with looking over the lower river. So yeah, it's an old Renaissance style architecture, and lot of French very famous
We've lost.
importance as well.
Deepti? I
Yeah.
think there's been some network fluctuation again.
Oh, okay.
Could you please repeat the previous slide?
Okay, just 1 second. Am I audible now?
Yeah, Deepti, now we can hear you, but I think there's still some fluctuation.
Oh, okay.
You can continue, Deepti, we can hear you.
Yeah. It's still loading the file. It's slightly heavy, so. Can you see it now?
Yeah, Deepti, we can see.
I'm sorry, I'll just keep it in this mode because it's getting stuck when I make it full screen. I hope it's fine.
Yeah, no problem, Deepti.
Yeah, sir. So the next visit was in March, and if you see, we landed on Monday, and within 1 hour of providing the accommodation, freshening up and all, we soon reached the site and the work started. So it was quite a new experience for me because it was not the typical drawing at sitting at office and making the drawings, but this had literal physical execution of the garden. So if you see, the soil is very clayey. On top of that, it was raining that day. It drizzles once in a while with 10 degrees Celsius, so it was quite cold. And what these two people are doing is they are carrying a plank to keep on the soil so that it's slightly easier to walk. And I had gone with the typical sports shoe to walk there to do the work, but it will not work there. So I was provided with rubber boots to do the site, help with the site execution. So if you see, the circular pond has slowly been dug up, and the three stepped terraces have taken shape and they have dumped in soil, and the boundaries have been clearly, slightly been marked. And this is me literally digging up the earth, leveling the soil. So it was a lot of physical exercise as well. Very new for me. And this is my friend who's cutting the wood. So these are oak wood logs, and it's a very commonly found tree in those areas, and it was easy to cut it and easier to use. And the best thing about these festivals are most of these materials will be reused later for future gardens as well. So it was not so bad. And these logs are cut and they were made into this little panels. So almost 200 pieces of these logs were cut and these panels were made. And this panels was more because it will be easier to make those curved terraces, and it will be easier to bind it all together. So this was all through a lot of trial and error. It was that one initially we started keeping individually the logs. They started falling apart. Then we came up with this idea of making this little panels so that they stand stronger. So yes, there was a lot of trial and error, and eventually we saw the other side of execution, the garden execution. So this is after slowly the panels were arranged and the different tires were coming up. And this was a very interesting detail. So this area is where the walkway is supposed to come, and this is the planting area. So instead of using the usual heavy curb, what we have, the concrete curbs, these metal strips were used. They are only like 6 inches in thickness or width, and they are so easy to bend and fix. So that was a very interesting, neat detail to separate the planting and the walkway. And what here it's been put is calcite. It's a type of limestone crushed, and on top of it gravel will be put. So within 5 days, by Friday afternoon, this is the garden, most of the civil work was done. So it was very interesting. Every day, 8:30 a.m. sharp, we will start our work, and 5:30 p.m. It will end. And a little lunch break, 1 hour lunch break in between. So it was nice to see the garden taking shape in this 1 week, and it will be quite exhausting by evening, and all the teammates will sit together, dine, they'll talk about food, they'll talk about landscape. There was a lot of cultural exchange, and this was the food we were provided. They were one of the best food which I had in France. So no wonder the French cuisine is so famous. And it was very interesting how the other participants participated. They brought in their parents, they brought in their neighbors. They were quite used to building gardens of their own. So now the garden got inaugurated on May 16th, and it's open to the public till November end. And this is the entry to the garden. So if you see, all the brown plants are all green now, and the spring has come, and the plants have become all lush and green. So So this is the entry, and at the entrance there's this little board which describes about the design and the landscape architect's name written on it. And this is the dense planting which I was saying. You are entering the garden through this dense foliage, and you keep on walking, and there is that sense of curiosity which happens, and slowly you start getting glimpses of the water body, the circular water body, and finally this is the view. It opens up to the circular pond, the stepped terraces, and they're all reflecting in the water. So this was the idea what I wanted, the sky reflecting into the water, the surrounding landscape, all tying up in this little water body. And it's very interesting how we got this reflective quality. Using tiles, it will become very expensive. So what was done was a dark blue color was mixed in the water, and you get that tinge which helps in the enhancing the reflective quality of water. So these are the visitors who are visiting the garden, and I often get mails from the visitors saying they felt very peaceful being in the garden and just enjoying the scenery, and it felt like a different world for them. And this is the bench, which I was saying, the corner bench, where people can sit and enjoy the view. And these are the steps going up. So if you see how it was during the construction time, and now there's a stark change, and it looks so nice, and I feel very happy when I see these images. They were all sent by visitors to me. Of course, I couldn't visit it after the inauguration. So these are the stepped terraces and the walkway which I was showing before with the thin metal separator. And it's very interesting how children see a garden. Their vision of a garden, their use of a garden is very different than what generally we think. So this is the final garden. The next project again is a garden in Bangalore. That also got completed like 3-4 months back. So this is a residence for a couple, Shreya and Siddharth. And it's again located in Good Earth, Kengeri, and if you remember, Michael Little had spoken about this project in the first talk. So this is a very interesting garden. It's an L-shaped plot. If you see, there is good red soil, and in the corner there was a fig tree and a banana plant. That's all. It's a plain blank site. And the best thing about these corner plots is that you get a nice L-shaped garden. And this was the landscape area, and this is the entry, the living room, the sit out, the dining, and the kitchen. So this area was decided to be more of the recreation or for private use or for the recreational purpose, and this area was maintained for kitchen gardening because the client was very much fond of growing vegetables. And this is how the design started taking shape. From the sit-out, there was the circular seating, dining court was provided, and a floating pavilion in a water body with floating bridges to connect it. And this could be used in any way you want. You could just tie a hammock, or you can sit on the base and just have a little picnic. And there were little boulders kept here and there, and there is the series of very randomly cut stepping stones which are placed, and there is this pot, terracotta pot has been kept. Basically it rains a lot, and there's a balcony which comes on an upper level, and this water used to fall down. This whole area used to become very muddy. So this pot was given, and a gravel base was given, and all this water percolates down. And these steps, finally, stepping stones, they lead to the fig tree, and a semicircular bench was given next to it, and this stepping stone further leads to the kitchen garden. And if you can see the little stands, they're actually customized light fixtures. I always like to customize these little details. So all of them were designed and detailed out, and yeah. And from here, it finally leads to the kitchen garden with 2-3 trellis support was given. And this was the basic concept for the design. So I always believe your client also plays a very important role in your design, the freedom to design and to make it executed as you imagine. So, can you see the slide?
Yes, Deepti, we can see the slide.
Okay. Just 1 minute. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So a lot of details were developed for the garden, and if you look at this, this is the circular sit out or the dining breakfast table, and this is a floating pavilion which comes in the design. So the clients had a lot of this mosaic tiles which was bought from Turkey, and the design was integrated, developed such that it integrates these little tiles into the flooring pattern of the garden or the pavilion. So this is the circular sit out table with bricks, and very carefully done radial pattern granite was cut to get this exact pattern to be replicated. Then this is the floating bridge to cross to the pavilion, and it's just supported on this pocket and this part, and in between it's just free floating. It's almost a 75 mm thick Sadhurali stone, and this is the roof structure, and it was done in metal, and we had customized this roof tiles with stained glass matching to this Turkey tiles, which I'll show you later. And this is the semicircular bench around the fig tree, and there was a compost pit designed to put in all the organic matter for decomposing and to be used as a manure later. And like how I said before, these light fixtures were customized, and the two types of them were developed. So this is a very simple detail with terracotta jali blocks and granite columns, and this top surface you can, and this was the other one. So this is this whole stretch is the vegetable garden area using bamboo poles, and once in a while this bamboo pole pops up, and there's a little so now the garden is almost ready, and you can see the circular sit out and the floating bridge, the pavilion, and this was a stained glass which I was telling, and it creates a beautiful play of light in this pavilion, and you can see the reflection happening in the water body as well. And this is further detail. All the plants are growing up, and it's amazing that just in 3 months you can see they look happy and healthy. And this is the terracotta pot from where the water falls down, the semicircular bench with very random cut stone paving which leads to the vegetable garden, and the grass, or mainly buffalo grass, was used for the same. And nearly 95 types of shrubs have been used in this plant, which attract bees, butterflies, birds. So in the end, we wanted to create a small micro habitat in this garden pocket. And this is the planter box, very smoothly following curved profile with the light fixtures jutting out. So it's getting the warm, cozy feel with time. And last month, many of these dragonflies had come to visit the garden. Happy. So all these photos are again clicked the clients and sent to me. So yeah, it feels good. So I'm doing other projects, larger scale ones like coffee. Coffee theme was given for the resort planning, and a lot of the slope and the water flow, all that is being. Second is a plotted development project, and the other one more is a factory which is coming up in Pune. Further beyond that, if you look at the hills.
You've gone Kadamba, Kadamba, Kadamba. Kadamba, Kadamba, Kadamba. Kadamba, no? Kadamba, 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 Kadamba.
We've lost audio.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Deepti, we can hear you.
Just 1 minute. Is the screen visible? Is the screen visible?
Yeah, Deepti, it's visible. Deepthi, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Deepthi, we can hear you.
Yeah. So this is one quote of Sir Geoffrey Jellicoe, which I quite admire. It basically says, "It's an affair of the mind, mind rather than the eyes. The eye conveys what it sees, but it's the mind that turns the image into a vast world of imagination." So even the smallest object, what we see, can, if we think a bit differently or just use our imagination, I think it can do a lot of wonders. So. Yeah, so being from since my childhood, I had stayed in different parts of different states. But for all our summer vacations, we used to come to my native, which was in a small village called Benmani in Alapi district. And this was a scene which I would see from my study room. And I just could observe it for hours. So it was so dynamic. There'll be the mongoose trying to attack the snake running after the rodent, or the parrots eating the guava fruits, or the passion fruit growing up, or the cows grazing, wildflowers coming up. So it was so dynamic, and the same same frame in the monsoon season will be a very different story. There will be the smell of damp earth, and there will be the frogs croaking. So I feel if we could capture such emotions in our design, I feel that it will be a great detail. And all these memories, my childhood memories, play a very important role in how I like to design or how I see landscape. So this is a little stream drawing the river, or this the other photo is of flowers from our garden, which we use for worship. And then this is a temple pond from very close to my house where a lot of lotus grows. Or if you look at the second image, there is this little burst of color which is happening because of the colocasia leaves, or the Mirabilis jalapa blooming in. So that little tinge of color with that different textures, the big leaves, the small leaf. So it is adding so much warmth to that place. And this is one painter whom I admire a lot, his works. He's Claude Monet, and he's a French artist, and he was very fond of plants. And he bought a piece of land which had a little pond in his garden. And this pond, he planted all these plants around it. And nearly 250 paintings were made of this little lily pond. And it's called the Water Lily series. So what this paintings captured was how the different reflection during different times of the year, they were painted, the movement of the leaves, the blooming of the flowers. So I feel art, music, literature, nature, wildlife, all are very interrelated. And I feel if we know more about it, we can, I think we can design slightly, think differently while designing. So yes, thank you, and thanks a lot for bearing with this internet fluctuation. I'm not very good with all this online technology, but yeah, thanks a lot. Yes.
Thank you so much, Deepthi. We have a question from a participant. They say, can you please elaborate on the material used for creating the pond in the French garden?
The pond, it was very, again, since the cost was limited, there is this 8 lakh rupees which is allotted for each garden, and you need to design within that allotted budget. So what we did was we just placed a pond liner in that pit and filled it with water. So that's all. Very simple, very low cost.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, there are a few of them who say that your presentation was wonderful. There is a question. How did you choose plants for the France project?
Yeah. So the plants were very, like how I said, I went in January to discuss regarding the planting palette. So I already had a list of plants and we cross-checked if it is available there. So like all the plants go locally there, like how I mentioned, the herbs, the fragrant flowers. So it was all based on the plants which grow there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Deepti.
Yes.
Your projects show the depth of your study and research for the context. It shows that how every small element adds to the design as a whole. I take this opportunity to congratulate Architect Deepti for having won the award for the prestigious International Garden Festival. I think it was after 20 plus years that an Indian has been nominated for this. We're so proud of you, Deepti. I now request Head of Masters Program, Mr. Rachika Rao, to say a few words. Over to you, sir.
All of you. It was a wonderful presentation, Deepti. I know Deepti from last 3-4 years. We called her as a visiting faculty, and I have seen her progress. So she, it's a dramatic and it is hard work which she does everywhere, whether it is institution or in a practice. It's nice to see that she has won that France competition. Encouraging important for. It's very important to encourage people like youngsters like Deepti or Varna. So I believe in that, and whoever comes to our institution, our first aim to encourage people so that they could do wonder. Why foreigners has to come and do landscape projects in India? Why not we could go and do landscape projects in other countries? That's what Deepti has done. That I think that's a very proud moment for our institution, for Deepti, also for all of us. So that's very important to understand that yes, you need to take a chance. You need to try. That is very important. So Deepti has done that. She has tried. Yes, she has put a lot of effort to win that particular competition. Very special thing about Deepti is she's very unique as a person, as a conceptual and other thing. I used to give a lot of freedom to all the faculties in our institution because I know what freedom means. So it's very important to give a freedom for people so that they could do what they want. And I always say that if we given a freedom, we should do something very unique. So, and Deepti is always unique in that, and her concepts are totally different. And whenever the design trade is concerned, we used to leave it to Deepti. So, she could get something very unique project to the studio. So, thank you, Deepti, for very insightful presentation. I liked your sketches. That's fantastic, and you are taking nature walk in Kadam Park, Lal Bagh. Those are all, you have a lot of other hobbies which is all related to landscape architecture. So that's very nice of her. Deepti, it was a wonderful presentation. God bless you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. And I also want to congratulate all of you for this beautiful terrain. Even though it's all online, I just love it because it's connected the whole world to participate in this event. And yeah, it's wonderful. So awesome. Great initiative. Thanks a lot, all of you. And thanks a lot, Jyotsna. Yes.
So with this, we come to the end of day 4. Request all participants to fill in the feedback form sent to you either in your mail or in the WhatsApp groups. Thank you all for joining us for today's session. I would like to thank our HOD Professor Pushpa Devanathan and Head of Masters Program Professor Rajshekhar Rao for giving us this opportunity for hosting this FTP. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. I would also like to thank my co-moderators for the day, Architect Ranjita and Architect Malika. Tomorrow will be the last day of the FTP. Request you all to log in by 11 a.m. Thank you one and all. Have a lovely day.
Oh.